Welcome, everyone. This is John Smith, minister with the Church of Christ in Weyburn, Saskatchewan. And if you're joining us live, then this is Tuesday evening in Weyburn, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. And but you may be accessing this video later than that, which is fine. This is a lesson 11 of a series of online Bible studies from the book of Jeremiah. And we started this series earlier in 2021 and took a break during the months of July and August and the first couple of Tuesdays in September. But today we're resuming this series. And if you haven't been with us before, stay with us. You don't have to have studied the previous chapters to benefit from what we're doing here. But tonight we're looking at Jeremiah chapters 39, 40, and 41, and trying to delve into the material that's there. We won't have time to read it all. I encourage from week to week that you take the time to read it, and I'll let you know what to read in preparation for next Tuesday's Bible study, which will be posted next Tuesday evening at least, lesson 12 from the series. But what I want to focus on also is some application. There is, of course, some lessons that we are intended to draw from these things, even though the prophet was speaking to a people in a time long ago and about their situation. There are principles and there are pointers, things that point to Jesus and some of his teachings that we in our time, those of us especially that are striving to be disciples of Jesus, should take to heart and put into practice. So we'll try to do that. Let me just summarize where we have been in the book of Jeremiah, for the benefit of all of us, really, to remind us what has gone previously in the book. And like I said, if you're joining us just now and not having the benefit of the previous classes that we've done in this series, then this will, well, it won't exactly bring you completely up to date, but it's just a brief summary. The first 21 chapters of Jeremiah are mostly prophecies placed during the reign of King Josiah. And they're the prophecies that God gave to Jeremiah, and they're basically warnings and judgments against Jerusalem and Judah for their idolatry and their failure to keep the covenant with God, according to the law of Moses. And they're doomed to come to an end, the southern kingdom of Judah, the same way that the northern kingdom in a previous time, the kingdom of Israel, had come to an end. So their punishment is going to parallel that. They're going to end in captivity and many of their people being taken as exiles, and many of their people perishing, and the city of Jerusalem being destroyed. Jeremiah, the prophet himself, is denounced and persecuted by the people who reject his prophecies. He laments on many occasions. He's often called the weeping prophet because of that. But his lamenting shows that he is feeling distress over the fate of the people. He has a heart for the people that he's speaking to, even though, they are not accepting his message. And it also shows his personal faithfulness to God, that he is faithful to the message that God gives him. There are other prophets who are circulating during Jeremiah's time and who are telling the people messages of good news because that's what the people want to hear. And Jeremiah is being faithful to what God has shown him and what God is revealing. And and unfortunately, it's not a happy ending. In Jeremiah 22 to 28, then, the next block of chapters that brings us up to the point we are now, this series of prophecies appears in more random chronological order, but it does move later in the period of history to the reigns of Judah's last two kings. Okay, so up through chapter 21, it was mostly during the reign of King Josiah, but now in these chapters, through chapter 38, it's happening during the reigns of Jehoiakim and Zedekiah, who were two of the last kings of Judah. But the different prophecies and events in the narrative are not, it's not a chronological flowing narrative. It jumps back and forth in the dates and the time periods. But it's the message again is consistent. Jeremiah is warning of the impending 70-year period of captivity that they're about to experience. But the people remain unrepentant before God and unrelenting in their persecution of the prophet. So we come to Jeremiah 39. As I said, I'm not going to read everything in these chapters, but I'm going to pick out some excerpts. So let me just summarize what's in chapter 39. And I'll go sort of piece by piece, but the overall chapter basically is the fall of Jerusalem, but Jeremiah the prophet is preserved. Okay, that's basically what happens in chapter 39. So in the first 4 verses, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, brings down Jerusalem by a siege that has lasted about 18 months, and really is successfully completed. And if you're trying to think of the historical date, that would be 588 BC is when this particular siege of Jerusalem succeeds, and Nebuchadnezzar and his armies invade the city and begin to destroy Jerusalem, and a wave of people are taken captive. So, but in verses 5 to 9, the king at the time, Zedekiah, tries to escape from the invaders, but he is captured on the plains of Jericho, and he's dragged before King Nebuchadnezzar, who is camped with his army, and so Zedekiah punishes him, or sorry, Nebuchadnezzar punishes King Zedekiah, his captive, by making him watch as his sons are slaughtered in cold blood. So the sons of King Zedekiah of Judah are slaughtered before his eyes, and that's the last thing he's made to watch. And then Nebuchadnezzar has his eyes put out, has Zedekiah's eyes put out, and then Zedekiah is put in stocks and taken prisoner, but he's now blind. And then after this, the Babylonians begin burning the city of Jerusalem, burning the palace and the royal houses, and destroying the temple and the temple walls, and this is the destruction of Jerusalem that Jeremiah has been talking about. By the way, there was a lot of fire, like prophecy of fire, in Jeremiah's predictions, and sure enough, the Babylonians are using a lot of fire to destroy the city. In verses 15 to 18 in verses 10 to 14, okay, the next little section, now a deportation of captives is underway. But Jeremiah ends up being spared at this time, and he's put under care of a man by the name of Gedaliah. And so we should read verses 15 to 18 just to learn a little bit about that. We'll read more about Gedaliah as the governor appointed by Babylon in the next chapter. But there's a little highlight here right at the end of chapter 39, which ties us back to some of the earlier stuff, events of Jeremiah that we should touch base with. So let me just read those verses. I'm in Jeremiah 39, verses 15 to 18. So just the last paragraph, I guess, of the chapter. The word of the Lord came to Jeremiah while he was confined in the court of the guard. Go and say to Ebed-melech the Ethiopian, thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, I am going to fulfill my words against this city for evil and not for good, and they shall be accomplished in your presence on that day. But I will save you on that day, says the Lord, and you shall not be handed over to those whom you dread. For I will surely save you, and you shall not fall by the sword, but you shall have your life as a prize of war, because you have trusted in me, says the Lord. So this is speaking about Ebed-melech, who's an Ethiopian. Well, do you remember, if you remember the earlier part of Jeremiah or were with us in that? Maybe not. And so let's go back to that. It's what he did is in chapter 38, and I'm going to go ahead and read verses 7 through 13. This Ethiopian man saved the life of Jeremiah when Jeremiah had been thrown into the bottom of a cistern and basically left there to starve to death. But instead, this is what happened. I'll just read this. Jeremiah 38, verses 7 through 13. Ebed-melech the Ethiopian, a eunuch in the king's house, heard that they had put Jeremiah into the cistern. The king happened to be sitting at the Benjamin gate, so Ebed-melech left the king's house and spoke to the king. My lord, king, these men have acted wickedly in all they did to the prophet Jeremiah by throwing him into the cistern to die there of hunger, for there is no bread left in the city. Then the king commanded Ebed-melech the Ethiopian, take 3 men with you from here and pull the prophet Jeremiah up from the cistern before he dies. So Ebed-melech took the men with him and went to the house of the king, to a wardrobe of the storehouse, and took from there old rags and worn-out clothes, which he let down to Jeremiah in the cistern by ropes. Then Ebed-melech the Ethiopian said to Jeremiah, just put the rags and clothes beneath your armpits and the ropes. Jeremiah did so. Then they drew Jeremiah up by the ropes and pulled him out of the cistern, and Jeremiah remained in the court of the guard. So that's how Ebed-melech had proved his faithfulness, and as it says in the last verse of chapter 39, but you shall have your life as a prize of war because you have trusted in me, says the Lord. Even though this man was an Ethiopian, unlike the people of Judah who should have been listening to Jeremiah and not persecuting the prophet, Ebed-melech valued the life of Jeremiah and realized that this was a wrong thing, that they were trying to put him to death. So anyways, God is rewarding this Ethiopian man. He's not going to be swallowed up in this invasion by the Babylonians, even though there's no reason why they would want to spare his life. God is going to make sure that he is protected. So that's kind of a cool promise. So chapter 40. In chapter 40, in the first 6 verses, so then Jeremiah is released in a sense, but he is put under the care of Gedaliah, or he goes to the care of Gedaliah. And maybe I'll just read verses 5 and 6, and then we'll learn a little bit about, well, who is this Gedaliah and why Why is it a good thing that he's the governor, and why is this a favorable thing, at least to this point, for Jeremiah? So verses 5 and 6. This is what Jeremiah is being told. If you remain, then return to Gedaliah, son of Ahikam, son of Shaphan, whom the king of Babylon appointed governor of the towns of Judah, and stay with him among the people, or go wherever you think it is right to go. So the captain of the guard gave him an allowance of food and a present, and let him go. Then Jeremiah went to Gedaliah, son of Ahikam, at Mizpah, and stayed with him among the people who were left in the land. Okay, so these are the people who are left in the land, and they're under the care of and the supervision, I guess, of the an appointed governor. He's a Judean himself, but he's been appointed by Babylon to be the governor over the remnant of Judeans that haven't been taken away, and they would be the poor and the destitute, and they would be the people that the Babylonians didn't value enough to take and be groomed for better things in the land of the Babylonians, which of course we read Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and there were many others that were taken to Babylon because they were young and they had potential to contribute to things there. The people that are left behind are poor and destitute, and but a governor named Gedaliah is put in charge of them, a Judean, and Jeremiah is put under his care. Now, why might this be a good thing? Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan. Well, Gedaliah was representative of a house which, for several generations, had been good to the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. For instance, we read in 2 Kings chapter 22 about Shaphan. Okay, this is Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan. Okay, so who is Shaphan? Well, Shaphan was the king's scribe in the early years of King Josiah. And so he had taken an active part in the restoration of the temple and the reading of the book of the finding of the book of law, which we believe was the book of Deuteronomy, and you can read all about that in 2 Kings 22. That's Shaphan. Well, then Shaphan has a son named Ahikam, and Ahikam was also acting with his father Shaphan in this restoration during Josiah's time. So that would have been when Ahikam was young. But later, we're told in Jeremiah 26:24 that Ahikam protected Jeremiah during the reign of Jehoiakim. Okay, and so now this is the son of Ahikam, Gedaliah, who now is going to serve as the prophet's friend and protector, as he has been appointed by Babylon to be the governor of the remnant that's been left behind in Judah. So it's kind of neat how this has turned out. This is part of the means by which God is fulfilling his promises to be with Jeremiah and to see him through a lot of difficulties. And verses 7 through 12 of chapter 40 tell us how the remnant peoples of Judah gather under Gedaliah's governorship. They flock to him, and they enjoy prosperity under his care as the governor. But in verses 13 to 16, Johanan comes to him and warns him that there's a plot to assassinate him. There's this man by the name of Ishmael who is plotting to come and assassinate the governor. Well, Gedaliah doesn't really believe it, and he dismisses the threat, which ends up being tragic. In the next chapter, Ishmael comes. Verses 1 through 10. Ishmael comes with 10 accomplices and in a very devious fashion slaughters Gedaliah. Sits down, with his 10 men and has a kind of a meal, a banquet perhaps, with Gedaliah. And then all of a sudden, they all rise up and slaughter the governor. And then there's a group of mourners from places that were formerly the northern kingdom of Israel who have come. There are 80 of them. They're coming in mourning to come to the temple ruins, to worship at the ruins and no doubt lament the destruction of the temple. And Gedaliah, when he encounters them, Gedaliah has been slaughtered by Ishmael. Ishmael and his cohort, they slaughter then these 80 helpless, really, probably, no doubt, unarmed and unsuspecting worshippers who have come to mourn and offer sacrifice at the temple ruins. And so, anyways, 10 of them are spared because I don't know if they bribed their way or they just begged their way, but they knew where there were some provisions of food and stuff stashed, and so they begged for their life, and they told Ishmael where this was, where he could find this stuff, and so some of them are spared, but otherwise, he slaughters this group of people and Gedaliah, and he throws all of them, all of these dead bodies, ungraciously into an empty cistern. And then Ishmael takes control of the Judeans over which Gedaliah had been the governor. Basically takes them captive. The people that had been enjoying prosperity under Gedaliah. Well, continuing in chapter 41, starting at verse 11, Johanan comes with a force of armed Judeans and rescues the captives, and goes after Ishmael and his men. But Ishmael manages to escape, and a few of his accomplices, and they flee into the region of Ammon. And either Ammon was behind what Ishmael was doing, or Ishmael was trying to garner the support of Ammon. But anyways, when his coup to take control by slaughtering or assassinating Gedaliah fails, he flees to Ammon for safety. And so here's some of our first moments that I'm going to take to ask a little bit of question about application. What accounts for the treacherous actions of Ishmael? Perhaps Ishmael was merely jealous of Gedaliah's power and position. For the most part, the Judean leftovers are poor, and don't have much. And Gedaliah is probably in quite a prosperous position when he's installed as governor. And so maybe Ishmael's issue was just jealousy and envy that, well, why did Gedaliah get to be the governor? I'm going to take him out and I'm going to take his position and take all that for me. Maybe that's what it was. Or perhaps Ishmael thought of Gedaliah as a traitor, to be serving as governor on behalf of the Babylonian king. Kind of like the people hated the tax collectors in Jesus' day because they were working on behalf of the Romans, the Roman occupiers. And although Ishmael himself is being a traitor, if he's indeed acting with the support or even more so on behalf of the Ammonites, who are really a long-time enemy of the Jews, hated by the Jews for a lot of reasons. And but here's some application to this that I want us to think about. What danger to ourselves does it pose when we have strong feelings of jealousy and malice toward another person? We're seeing this in Ishmael, so much so that he assassinates Gedaliah. But what danger do we pose to ourselves when we get jealous and we start to have ill will towards someone, bitter feelings? It poisons our thoughts, doesn't it? It leads to wicked actions and decays our own soul. Really, we become the worst victim of whatever happens when we act out of jealousy and malice. We destroy ourselves. I mean, we may be trying to destroy someone, and we may destroy someone else. But we also, in the process, destroy our own soul. It's a poison within us if we don't deal with our jealousy and malice and overcome that. But the other part of the question is, what harm is done to others when something like this happens? And especially when someone good is brought down because of jealousy and malice. Of course, this was an unfortunate thing for an unfortunate thing. It was fatal for Gedaliah, and it also ended up being fatal for Ishmael himself. But it was also damaging to everybody. They were enjoying a period of, after the destruction of Jerusalem and the hauling away of captives and the slaughter of a bunch of others. Now there was a time of peace, relative peace, and the people were enjoying some prosperity as Gedaliah served as the governor. They were able to have reserves of grain and oil, and things were going pretty good. And then Ishmael comes along, and in his fit of envy and malice and rage and ill will and attacks and assassinates. And so when that happens, what harm is done when someone is brought down by jealousy and malice? Well, sometimes we are deprived of good people in positions of leadership and power. Someone who's doing well and providing good leadership and in a good position, but somebody below them who wants what they have ends up undercutting them and bringing them down. We see that actually time and time again. Sometimes sometimes a person in power has something in their character and in their record that should disqualify them from what they're doing. But that's not the case as far as we know with Gedaliah. Gedaliah comes from from generations of men who have been faithful to God and supportive of God's prophets, and he was doing a good job. And now everybody's going to suffer because he's been removed from that position of governor, and now they have this, thug that that has taken him out, and taken control. So there is shock and distrust, because now treachery and corruption has crept in, and there's an atmosphere of unrest and dread. What's going to happen next? We thought things were going to be okay, and now they're not. And even after Ishmael's gone, the people have to wonder, okay, when's the next shoe going to drop now? What else is going to happen? It just kind of spoils it all. What does Jesus teach us? That would be the opposite of what Ishmael was doing. Jesus teaches us to be peacemakers. And Jesus teaches us to look out for the interests of others, not only ourselves. I think of the teaching by Paul in Philippians 2. We ought to look to the interests of others and not our own, and then he holds Jesus up as the example of that, who came to this earth and took on human flesh and went to the cross, etc. And Jesus taught us, didn't he, in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, verse 9, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." Well, in Jeremiah 41, we kind of have this that I'd like to read, which really brings us to the end of what we're looking at tonight. So Jeremiah 41, I'm going to read verses 16 through 18, which does finish up the section that we wanted to cover tonight. Then Johanan, son of Kareah, and all the leaders of the forces with him took all the rest of the people whom Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, had carried away captive from Mizpah after he had slain Gedaliah, son of Ahikam, soldiers, women, children, and eunuchs, whom Johanan brought back from Gibeon. And they set out and stopped at Geruth Chimham, near Bethlehem, intending to go to Egypt, because of the Chaldeans, for they were afraid of them, because Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, had killed Gedaliah, son of Ahikam, whom the king of Babylon had made governor over the land. So what are we seeing here? Well, we're seeing that Johanan and the soldiers who he brought and got rid of Ishmael and, kind of released that thug's grip on the remnant Judeans. But what he's doing now is he's leading them to Egypt. Why do you think they are planning to go to Egypt? Well, the text gives us one clue for sure. They fear that the king of Babylon is going to punish them because, there was an insurrection that ended up with the death, the assassination of his appointed governor, Gedaliah. So they're thinking that Babylon is going to hear about what happened and is, going to bring some kind of hardship, maybe just come and take them all captive to Babylon or something, and they won't be able to stay and enjoy the kind of relative calm that and some semblance of normalcy living on in the land of Judea that they were able to enjoy under the governor. Maybe they're afraid that's not going to come back, and instead they're going to incur some kind of hardship. So they're on their way to Egypt under Johanan's leadership. That we better get out of here. We better go to Egypt, where maybe they'll keep us safe from from the Babylonians. But the other thing, which is kind of not really said, but I think we're going to see it in the coming chapters, is that why are they not trusting God here? To protect, Egypt has been a problem before. I mean, their trust in Egypt has been a problem before, but now it looks like they're running to Egypt again, hoping that they'll find protection there. And is that a display of a lack of trust in God? So for next week, our study is going to be chapters 42 through 45. Okay? And in chapters 42 to 45, we're going to see how a faithless flight attempt to Egypt fails. Okay, a faithless flight attempt to Egypt fails. But I think for us, the lessons, we should take some good lessons from Jeremiah's faithfulness, from Ebed-Melech's faithfulness, the Ethiopian guy who looked after Jeremiah, and how God blessed them through these, these are kind of weird circumstances, but God is preserving Jeremiah and preserving people. Unfortunately, Gedaliah ends up losing his life, and we see that because of the treachery and the evil intents of Ishmael, and so I guess on the other side of the coin we see the negative effects of taking action in that kind of way. So really the application for us is, how are we going to go about things in our situation? How are we going to deal with the conflicts and the issues of our day, in the problems going on in our society, maybe in some of the relationships that we have with people? Are we going to be peacemakers? Are we going to be faithful to God? Are we going to be good to the people that are obedient to God and give them justice? Or are we going to try in sort of selfish ways to just prosper ourselves and, in a dog-eat-dog world, not worry about who we might trample or who gets trampled in some way in the process of us climbing to the top? These, I think, are some of the things that are that speak to me and speak to us when we look at the prophet Jeremiah. So anyways, thank you for joining us for our Bible study. I hope this has been valuable. Again, I want to encourage you to join us next Tuesday evening or whenever you can access Lesson 12 after it's posted. And if you want to read ahead, please be reading Jeremiah chapters 42, 43, 44, and 45 in preparation. Thanks for joining us this evening. And remember that in 21, He's still the one.